okay?
It started as rioting, and right from the beginning you knew this was different, because it was happening in small villages. It was the blood, something in the blood.
Control room, this is General Stone. All forces under my control prepare to execute Code Red at my command.
Hey, why are you stealing us inside here?
Our protection!
Only target infected. Roger that, only target infected.
Jesus, I don't see who's a target.
Abandon selective targeting. Shoot everything. We've lost control.
Shooting everybody.
Makes no sense.
It makes perfect sense. It's Code Red.
It's been over 2 decades since Danny Boyle and Alex Garland unleashed 28 Days Later, and let's face it, it changed everything. The slow, shambling zombies of old were replaced with fast, primal nightmares infected by the now legendary Rage virus and turned into humans driven into a mindless, murderous frenzy. It was fast and brutal, a fevered reflection of our worst instincts. Danny Boyle combined raw, gritty cinematography with a haunting, minimalist score to create something that felt disturbingly real, a breath of fresh air for the horror genre.
In the last year of the 20th century, communicable diseases accounted for an estimated 25% of deaths worldwide.
When you look at tuberculosis worldwide and malaria and the other infectious diseases, gastroenteritis in the third world, these are major killers.
Every day, the human body is coming under attack from disease-causing microbes. Nobody is immune.
We're living in a sea of bacteria, let there be no doubt about that. They're in our environment, they're on our skin.
So the idea of a new killer epidemic infecting the country is not far-fetched at all.
Then came 28 Weeks Later, a sequel that expanded on the chaos, upping the stakes and showcasing how quickly humanity can crumble when faced with an unstoppable force of nature. Now, with a recently released trailer for 28 Years Later, instead of 28 months later for some reason, Boyle and Garland are back, ready to drag us kicking and screaming into the next chapter of this apocalyptic nightmare, and it looks like it's gonna be one hell of a ride.
4, 8, 15, 23, 20 miles today.
What's real, what isn't, there's no escape.
Don't look away. If you falter, they'll see.
It's been years since the Rage virus first hit our screens, and some of you might not remember how devastating this infection was, or how it turned Britain into a smoking ruin. That's where this video comes in. First, we'll take an in-depth look at the Rage virus itself, what it is, how it works, and why it's such a horrifyingly believable creation, with references to the 28 Days Later comics. Then we'll break down 28 Days Later, the film that started everything, how it introduces us to a post-apocalyptic Britain overrun by the infected, and explore the terrifying fragility of human nature when society collapses. Finally, we'll break down 28 Weeks Later, the sequel that expanded the story, gave us even bigger stakes, and proved that humanity's greatest threat is often its own inability to learn from the past. The Rage virus, the catalyst for the nightmare of 28 Days Later, is as vicious as it is terrifying. Unlike traditional zombies, this infection doesn't raise the dead, but turns the living into mindless, rabid predators driven by pure, uncontrollable rage. Its terrifying plausibility as a blood-borne disease and its relentless speed make it one of the most harrowing pathogens in horror. The virus begins innocently enough, as misguided science often does. Cambridge scientists Clive and Warren were tasked with isolating the neurochemicals that trigger anger and aggression in humans. Their intention was noble: develop an inhibitor to help regulate uncontrollable anger. Unfortunately, Warren's genius took a dark turn. Rather than relying on pills or aerosols for delivery, he decided to use the Ebola virus as a carrier. Within 2 weeks, the virus mutated violently, turning the inhibitor into the opposite of its intended purpose. Instead of suppressing rage, it amplified it to monstrous levels, birthing the rage virus, an infection that strips its host of all humanity and leaves behind a frenzied, homicidal shell. The rage virus is as horrific as it is efficient. A recombinant mutation of the Ebola virus, it delivers not death but a twisted existence of uncontrollable, violent rage. The infection spreads through blood and saliva with horrifying speed, and a host has between 10 to 20 seconds before succumbing to the virus. Transmission can occur in a multitude of ways: a bite, blood spewed into the face, or even a single drop of infected fluid entering the eyes or mouth. The incubation period depends on exposure. A significant dose, such as vomiting directly into the victim's face, triggers almost immediate transformation. In contrast, smaller exposures, like a drop of blood, take slightly longer, anywhere between 15 to 30 agonizing seconds. Once infected, the transformation is as brutal as the virus itself. Victims suffer violent spasms, convulsions, and painful hemorrhaging as the body succumbs to rage. The infection is marked by its signature crimson eyes, a grotesque indicator of its hold on its hosts. Higher brain functions vanish, replaced by unrelenting aggression and a single instinct: attack anyone that's uninfected. Self-preservation, nourishment, and reason all become irrelevant as the infected launch themselves at their victims with terrifying speed and endurance. The virus also seems to influence behavior patterns over time. Recently infected individuals are most active during the day, while those infected for longer periods shift to nocturnal aggression, a chilling adaptation that makes the infected an ever-present threat. What makes the rage virus even more terrifying is its absolute biological precision. Like its Ebola ancestor, it is blood-borne, highly contagious, and seemingly capable of infecting only primates. Non-primates remain immune, though whether they could serve as carriers remains unknown. While it strips the host of intelligence, it also gifts them terrifying physical enhancements: heightened stamina, speed, and endurance that allow the infected to tear through towns and cities, leaving devastation in their wake.
Get the tar on Hannah! Right! Get it on Hannah! Come on! Red Tide!
Yet there are rare exceptions to the virus's otherwise absolute power. Certain individuals do possess a natural immunity to the symptoms. These carriers remain unaffected by the rage virus themselves, but are still highly contagious, as their blood and saliva carry the infection, which we'll get into when we go over 28 weeks later. The release of the virus was both catastrophic and preventable. Clive, disgusted by what he and Warren had created, leaked information about the project to the Animal Freedom Front. In a tragic display of blind activism, AFF operatives broke into the Cambridge Primate Research Center and released the infected test subjects. The moment a chimpanzee sank its teeth into one of them, the rage virus was unleashed. The infection spread like wildfire, first inside the lab, then across the city of Cambridge. The media, clueless to the scale of the disaster, dismissed the chaos as rioting, but the public would soon realize this civil unrest was not ordinary. In the days that followed, the virus engulfed Britain with brutal efficiency. From Cambridge, the infection spread south into London, a densely packed urban landscape where panic only accelerated the carnage. The infected then tore through the streets, hunting anyone unlucky enough to cross their path. Martial law was declared as the government and army scrambled to contain the outbreak, setting up military blockades around key cities like London and Manchester. But the virus was always one step ahead. Blockades were breached, Train stations like King's Cross became slaughterhouses, and desperate civilians trying to flee only added fuel to the fire. With basic services failing, from water pressure, electricity to communication, Britain descended into chaos. By day 15, NATO and the United Nations stepped in to quarantine Britain. Airspace was locked down, American carriers were redirected, and military research camps were established offshore, most notably on the Isle of Wight in a last-ditch effort to find a cure. Things only grew worse as the once great cities fell. Manchester, which was a major stronghold, was deliberately set ablaze in a desperate attempt to drive the infected into the countryside. Without fire crews to control the inferno, the flames consumed the entire city. What remained was a smouldering wasteland swarming with hordes of the infected, now free to roam across the countryside in search of new prey. By day 28, what was once a sovereign nation had been reduced to ashes, its cities hollowed out and its people decimated. The remaining survivors were scattered, clinging to life amidst the ruins, while the infected roamed the empty streets in endless, bloodthirsty pursuit. Organized society had crumbled completely. Power grids failed, broadcasts ceased, and the government, along with the military, had effectively collapsed. Britain had become a land of death and silence. But as time went on, nature did what it always does. It starved the monsters. Within 5 weeks to 6 months of the original outbreak, most of the infected in mainland England succumbed to starvation, collapsing where they stood. However, the infection still lingered in isolated pockets, particularly in Scotland, where freshly infected individuals kept the virus alive just long enough to delay its natural course. As seen in the 28 Days Later comics, months after the initial outbreak, the infection found its way to Shetland, presumably through unnoticed carriers or isolated incidents of contact. As the virus tore through the UK, the rest of the world was thrown into chaos. Waves of refugees fleeing the infected created a mass exodus, overwhelming neighboring nations and spreading widespread paranoia. In the United States, panic gripped the public as rumors swirled of the infection crossing the Atlantic. Airports became powder kegs, with a single sneeze at JFK Airport triggering a deadly stampede. Meanwhile, Europe saw its tourism industry collapse overnight, and paranoia reached absurd heights as seagulls along France's coastline were shot down in a futile attempt to prevent the virus jumping across the English Channel. The rage virus isn't just a plot device, it's an unstoppable force. It strips humanity down to its most primal instincts, spreading with devastating efficiency and turning its hosts into living weapons of destruction. What makes it so terrifying is how easily it spreads, how quickly it overwhelms, and how ruthlessly it reduces civilization to ashes. In a matter of weeks, Britain went from a modern society to an unrecognizable hellscape, all because of one reckless act in a research lab. It didn't just destroy bodies, it obliterated an entire nation and left the world staring into the abyss, terrified that they might be next.
And then it wasn't on the TV anymore. It was in the street outside. It was coming through your windows. By the time they tried to evacuate the cities, it was already too late. The army blockades were overrun, and that's when the exodus started.
28 Days Later opens with a chilling prologue. Led by the tip given to them by Clive, the Animal Freedom Front stormed the Cambridge Primate Research Centre and released the chimpanzees infected with the rage virus. The virus then spreads instantly, and within weeks, Britain descends into chaos.
Stop! You've no idea! We have to kill her now!
We then meet Cillian Murphy's Jim, who awakens from a coma in a deserted hospital and discovers that the infected aren't the only threat. Humanity itself, when pushed to the brink, can be just as monstrous. Boyle's direction here is masterful. The empty streets of London, devoid of human life, are haunting and surreal. I think if 28 Days Later succeeded in redefining the genre, it did so not just with its breakneck pacing and primal terror, but with a cast of characters that felt raw, flawed, and painfully human. Boyle's post-apocalyptic nightmare works because the people at its core are believable. They're not action heroes or invincible survivors. They're ordinary people forced to endure a world that's turned inside out. First and foremost is Jim, played to perfection by Cillian Murphy. Waking up in the hospital to a world ravaged by the rage virus, Jim begins as a bewildered, vulnerable everyman, a stand-in for the audience, trying to comprehend the horrors unfolding around him.
Hello? Hello?
Murphy's performance captures this beautifully. His wide-eyed confusion and fragility in the film's early moments make his transformation at the end all the more compelling. As Jim wanders the city, completely unaware of the danger he's in, he stumbles across evidence of societal collapse, abandoned cars, hastily scrawled warnings, and ominous bloodstains. He soon encounters his first infected, fast, furious, and terrifying, before being saved by Selena, played by Naomi Harris and Noah Huntley's Mark.
Oh, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have done that. Let's go! Let's go! Please tell me what the is going on.
While initially hesitant, the pair follow Jim to his family home, where he learns that his parents had taken their life and died peacefully in their sleep, confirming that the world he once knew was over. From the moment she's introduced, machete in hand and unflinching in her willingness to do what's necessary, Selena is the film's voice of practicality and pragmatism. Naomi Harris gives Selena a steely resolve, making her a stark contrast to Jim's initial fragility.
So who are you? Well, you're from a hospital, yeah?
Are you a doctor?
He's not a doctor, he's a patient.
But what makes Selena so compelling is the depth Harris brings to the role. Beneath the cold exterior lies a woman who's been broken by the world and forced to harden herself against it.
It might be your brother or your sister. It makes no difference. And just so you know where you stand, if it happens to you, I'll do it in a heartbeat.
She warns, and she proves it soon enough when Mark, her lover, is scratched by the infected. Without hesitation, Selena hacks him to death. This brutal moment sets the tone. Sentimentality has no place in this new world.
Mark?
Wait.
Yet as the story unfolds, Harris allows glimpses of vulnerability to shine through, particularly in her growing bond with Jim.
Got a headache.
Well, why didn't you say something before?
Well, because I didn't think you'd give a shit. So what do you make of them?
Well, they're desperate. Probably need us more than we need them.
Right, because if they slowed you down
I'd leave them behind.
in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
Way things are, we might need 2-3 days to get up there.
We?
Sound carries in this flat. Me and Hannah do need you more than you need us.
Selena's arc, therefore, becomes about rediscovering her humanity, and Harris delivers a performance that balances strength, fear, and compassion with absolute precision.
She's got a dad and he's got his daughter, so I was wrong when I said that staying alive is as good as it gets.
Jim and Selena's journey leads them to Frank and his daughter Hannah, who are holed up in a high-rise apartment.
Down the corridor, flat 157.
Move!
Where's Dad?
Take him inside.
Cause for celebration, I'd say. Hannah, what have we got to offer?
We've got Mum's creme de menthe.
Great.
Brendan Gleeson's Frank serves as the emotional heart of the film. Frank is her father doing his best to protect his daughter in a world that has robbed them of everything.
I can't leave the block if it's just the two of us. Something might happen to me. Hannah'd be alone, I couldn't risk it. But with other people...
Gleeson's performance is warm, genuine, and full of humanity. He's the film's beacon of hope, a reminder that love and kindness can exist even in the darkest of times. This makes his eventual fate all the more devastating.
Like a family.
Do you think they're infected?
No, they're doing just fine.
Night-night.
You're a big softy, Frank.
Megan Burns as Hannah gives a surprisingly understated yet effective performance as Frank's daughter. She's quiet, observant, and far more resilient than she initially appears. Burns avoids the typical cliches of child characters in horror films, delivering a performance that feels authentic and grounded.
It isn't true what Dad said. You need us just the same as we need you. We need each other.
Hannah's emotional strength, particularly in the aftermath of her father's demise, is one of the film's most poignant moments. She's not just a victim to be protected, she's a survivor in her own right, and Burns plays this with a subtlety that adds to the film's emotional depth.
What's wrong? Jimmy's infected! No! No! Jim! No!
You're not eating.
I don't want to eat.
You must eat, Hannah.
I don't want to eat. I want to bury my dad.
After hearing an announcement on the radio claiming there's a solution to the infection, together, the group decide to seek refuge at a military blockade, broadcasting promise of safety.
No, see, this is a really shit idea. You know why? Because it's really obviously a shit idea.
The journey there is both equal parts beautiful and harrowing. Boyle creates wonder through their shopping escapades and long chats while driving across the countryside, while simultaneously building tension through quiet moments of dread punctuated by sudden, brutal violence. The group narrowly escapes infected attacks, but tragedy strikes when Frank becomes infected after a drop of blood lands in his eye.
Dad, you all right?
Hannah, I love you very much. Stay where you are.
Dad?
When Frank succumbs to the virus, Gleason's transformation is heartbreaking. One moment he's a loving father, comforting his daughter. The next he's an uncontrollable monster, a victim of the same brutal world he fought so hard to protect her from. It's a gut-wrenching moment that works because of how deeply Gleason makes us care for Frank. The military arrives, killing Frank and whisking the others away to their compound. This is where 28 Days Later shifts gears. At first, the compound seems like salvation, but it quickly becomes clear that Major Henry West and his men are not saviors.
I promised them women.
8 days ago, I found Jones with his gun in his mouth. He said he was going to kill himself because there was no future. Women mean a future.
The soldiers, isolated from humanity, have descended into derangement and barbarity. West reveals his chilling plan to use the women as breeding stock to rebuild society, and Jim, Selena, and Hannah now face not just the infected, but also the horrors of human corruption.
Man has only been around for a few blinks of an eye, so if the infection wipes us all out, that is a return to normality.
This is what I've seen in the 4 weeks since infection. People killing people, which to my mind puts us in a state of normality right now.
Major West, played by Christopher Eccleston, is a character who embodies the notion that the infected aren't the only monsters. He brings an unsettling calm to the role, portraying West as a man who has descended into moral depravity under the guise of rebuilding civilization.
Secondary to protection, our real job is to rebuild. Start again. The idea was to learn something about infection. Have him teach me.
And has he?
In a way. He's telling me he's futureless. And eventually he'll tell me how long the infected take to starve to death.
He's not a raving villain. He's logical, articulate, and disturbingly reasonable in his twisted worldview. This makes him all the more terrifying, and his performance adds a layer of horror that goes beyond the infected. It's the realization that when society collapses, human beings are often capable of atrocities far worse than any virus.
We're just hoping for
the answer to infection. Or it's here, though it may not be quite what you imagined.
Starting the world again when the rest of the fucking world hasn't even stopped. Just think about it. How could infection cross the oceans?
There is no infection, it's just people killing people.
He's insane!
Escaping execution using nothing but his wits, Jim's transformation from an ordinary man into a savage warrior underscores the film's central theme: survival comes at a cost. He's forced to adapt, shedding his innocence to become a hardened survivor. Murphy handles the transition with finesse, embodying a man who's both terrified and capable of brutal violence when he's pushed to the brink. To overcome the overwhelming odds, Jim unleashes the infected, and in a stunning role reversal, becomes more monstrous than they are, killing the soldiers with primal rage. Yet it's this brutality that saves Selena and Hannah. The final moments are hopeful. Jim, Selena, and Hannah, now living in the countryside, are seen waving to a jet, hinting at a possible future beyond the nightmare, which is confirmed in the 28 Days Later comic.
In maintaining a realistic edge to the film, the filmmakers decided to use a cast of less familiar actors.
Jim is like the everyman, do you know what I mean? He's just a guy off the street, he's a bike courier. He wakes up out of a coma in a hospital, and the hospital is just completely abandoned, and he walks out onto Westminster Bridge, and then it's just desolate. There's signs of that something unusual has gone down.
What makes the characters in the film so memorable is how grounded and believable they are. Boyle and Garland crafted a world where survival strips people down to their rawest instincts, and the cast brings that vision to life with performances that feel painfully real. Cillian Murphy's journey from vulnerable everyman to hardened survivor anchors the film, while Naomi Harris's Selena, Brendan Gleeson's Frank, and Christopher Eccleston's Wes provide the emotional, moral, and thematic contrast that give the story its depth.
I have this wonderful relationship with my daughter, and we're hiding out in survival mode in a high-rise flat. He was just a very beautifully written character.
We have a spare room. There. Again, Selena.
At its core, 28 Days Later works because it understands that horror isn't just about monsters or gore, it's about people. The rage virus may be the catalyst for the chaos, but it's the characters who make the story resonate. To me, their struggles, their flaws, and their moments of humanity are what truly elevate the film beyond a standard zombie flick.
Selena is one of the people who's survived the rage virus that's been set loose. She's had to shut down emotionally in order to survive, so she's quite cold.
28 Days Later is a masterclass in horror filmmaking. Danny Boyle made a movie that is both deeply personal and horrifyingly broad in its implications. The rage virus is a brilliant invention, a fast, unstoppable force that taps into primal fears of contagion and chaos. But the true genius lies in how Boyle uses the virus as a backdrop to explore human nature. The infected may be terrifying, but the film's true villains are the soldiers at the compound. This dual threat, monsters outside and monsters within, gives the story its relentless tension.
I thought the script was terrifying. I thought it was a real page turner.
I was reading it thinking, oh, this is my kind of film. And so it's like I'd go to watch it in the cinemas and so.
That's what I said to him. I said, I like this, Danny. It's terrifying. Good.
The cinematography is iconic. Shot on digital video, the grainy, handheld visuals give the film a raw, documentary-like realism, and the desolate streets of London are unforgettable, a haunting vision of a world brought to its knees, while John Murphy's score builds a crescendo of dread that perfectly underscores the film's most intense moments.
To create a more urban feel to the images, the filmmakers chose digital video over film.
I think it's beautiful for urban work. It has a grittiness about it that's magnificent for your city movie, really. This is the way we record our lives. We are surrounded in this city by cameras. They're everywhere, and they're all these DV cameras, all types of them, and they're recording our every motion all the time.
It definitely suits the story, suits the British story, particularly that sort of slightly rough edge.
I think when you want something like this to feel really real, you know, it's an appropriate medium to use.
At its core, 28 Days Later is a story about survival and the cost of hope. It strips humanity down to its most primal instincts, fear, violence, and the desperate search for connection. The characters are compelling because they feel real. Jim's transformation, Selena's pragmatism, and Frank's love for his daughter anchor the horror in genuine emotion.
What attracted me most about the script was the intelligence of it and the issues that it was trying to investigate and the comment it was making on society in general.
Thematically, the film asks unsettling questions. How far would you go to survive? What happens to morality when society collapses? And are the infected really the monsters, or are we? These questions linger long after the credits roll.
We've fled this whole notion of rage and, you know, the modern malaise and the infection of it. And we come into something that's even more frightening, which is where that notion of survival hits base and where it's every man for himself.
The world is over, and it's just how you deal with continuing life.
It wasn't just one of the best horror films of the 21st century, it was a landmark piece of cinema. It revitalized the zombie genre, inspired countless imitators, and set a new standard for what horror could achieve. It was raw, relentless, and unforgettable, a grim reminder that the scariest monsters might just be the people staring back at us in the mirror.
The notion that we can put our faith in institutions and forget about them is what the danger is.
Infection knows no boundaries between countries, so there has to be international collaboration in tracking the spread of infectious diseases. But in the very nature of evolution, new ones will evolve or change and be able to cause disease. We have to be ready to deal with them.
The notion that you can say, well, I have a gun there, so that means I'm safe, is a nonsense.
It's a code red.
I know what it is. These kids are with me. My name is Andy! Scarlett! Andy!
You think it's a drill? Of course it's not a fucking drill.
We've got to find Aunt. It's okay. We'll find her.
I can't get a shot. I cannot be target specific.
Please be on the lookout for a young boy, age 12. He must be immediately evacuated from the containment zone.
Take him down. Left sector, 3 o'clock.
If 28 days later was a shot of adrenaline, 28 weeks later is a full-blown assault on the senses. Juan Carlos Fresnadillo's sequel doesn't just revisit the nightmare, it expands it and then unapologetically smashes humanity's feeble attempts at rebuilding into dust. Where Danny Boyle's original film explored the fragile humanity of survivors in a crumbling world, 28 weeks later strips that humanity bare and asks a darker question. What happens when we're arrogant enough to think we can control chaos? The answer, of course, is unrelenting carnage. It takes place, as the title suggests, 6 months after the initial outbreak devastated Britain. The rage virus has burned through the population, leaving the country a desolate, infected wasteland. The film introduces us to a fragile period of recovery. The US military, in all its well-meaning hubris, has declared parts of London safe and begun repopulating the city with survivors. They've rebuilt quarantine zones, fortified districts, and established a sense of order. On paper, it looks like hope. In practice, it's a powder keg waiting for a spark. The film follows a handful of characters navigating this illusory calm. Chief among them is Don, a man haunted by the choices he made during the initial outbreak, and his 2 children, Tammy and Andy, who are brought into the city to reunite with him. It's a family drama at its core, layered with gut-punch moments of horror. Of course, in a world where the rage virus still lingers, safety is a fleeting illusion. All it takes is one mistake, one moment of compassion, ignorance or arrogance for the virus to reignite and tear through the survivors like wildfire. This is where the sequel excels. It doesn't just pick up where its predecessor left off, it expands the scope of the nightmare. Fresnadillo trades the intimacy of 28 days later for something larger, bloodier, and more relentless. The infected aren't the only threat once again. Bureaucratic failure, military overreach, and humanity's inability to learn from its mistakes combine to paint a picture of systemic collapse. It's a film as much about human failure as it is about the ferocity of the rage virus itself. It's not just a zombie movie, it's a merciless examination of what happens when humanity tries to rebuild on the ashes of its own ruin. The rage virus may be the stuff of fiction, but its implications feel chillingly real.
She's a carrier.
Are you saying she has the ability to infect others?
Yes, sir. Please, sir. We need some time to study her. We need to run some tests.
Run tests on her corpse, Major.
If 28 weeks later is a brutal, unrelenting vision of humanity's failure, then its characters are the broken, desperate souls swept up in the carnage. The sequel delivers a cast of tragic, flawed individuals, some heroic, others selfish, but all undeniably human. Their stories underscore the film's central theme. When containing the virus becomes the only goal, morality and hope are often the first casualties.
It's been 5 days since your boyfriend ran out on us. If he's still breathing, which I doubt, it won't be the pasta he's interested in.
Jacob!
Who were chasing you?
My mum. My dad. They're trying to kill me.
The film begins with a punch to the stomach. We're introduced to Robert Carlyle's Don, a man holed up in a countryside cottage with his wife Alice, played by Catherine McCormack, and a group of survivors.
Oh, our children are safe, aren't they? Totally. Thank God we paid for that school trip. Can you imagine if we hadn't have done?
It's a moment of fragile calm, shattered instantly when they let a child inside and the infected chasing him swarm the house. The opening sequence is a relentless, heart-pounding display of terror as Don, in a moment of raw survival instinct, abandons Alice to save himself. Watching him flee, his face twisted in guilt and panic, sets the tone for what's to come. A world where survival is brutal, selfish, and often anything but heroic.
Just leave him! Leave him!
Don! Help us!
Don is the heart of the film, as a man defined by guilt and cowardice, and played with gut-wrenching conviction by Carlyle. His performance in the opening sequence is nothing short of masterful. In a matter of minutes, he shifts from a loving husband fighting to save his partner to a man consumed by panic and fear. It's a moment of raw human weakness that haunts Don's every decision from that point onwards, revealing him to be flawed and selfish and painfully real.
Oh, fuck. Oh, shit. Oh, shit. Oh, shit. Oh, shit.
Fast forward 6 months and Britain is a wasteland. The infected have starved to death and the US military has declared the country safe for repopulation. They establish a green zone in London's District 1, a fortified area where survivors are brought back to start anew. On the surface, it looks like hope, but as we all know, hope in the world of the rage virus is a dangerous illusion.
Colonel, I'm watching the new arrivals disembark.
Yes, Major.
No one told me that we're now admitting children.
The story kicks into gear with the arrival of Don's children, Tammy, played by Imogen Poots, and Macintosh Muggleton's Andy, who were brought to the Green Zone to reunite with their father.
How old are you, Andy?
12.
I think that makes you the youngest person in the entire country.
It's here we see the cracks in the foundation. Don, now a caretaker in the safe zone, understandably hides the truth about what happened to Alice from his children.
Your mum and I were hiding in the house, just trying to stay alive, I suppose. We were doing okay for a while, and then we were attacked. I tried to go back. She was already gone. I got to this military camp, and you know the rest, you know, I've been in quarantine waiting for you guys to come back. I'm sorry.
Tammy and Andy are the emotional core of the story. Children forced to survive in a world that has no place for innocence. Poots in particular delivers a standout performance as Tammy. She balances vulnerability with resilience, portraying a teenager who's both terrified and determined to protect her younger brother. There's a quiet strength in her performance that grounds the chaos around her.
I get worried I'm gonna forget what she looks like.
You won't forget.
Promise.
Macintosh Muggleton as Andy brings a sense of tragic innocence to the role. He's a child caught in a nightmare, grappling with the loss of his mother. Together, Tammy and Andy serve as a glimmer of hope, a faint, fragile reminder of humanity in a world consumed by rage, but they simultaneously represent heralds of the apocalypse as the film nears the end.
Do you think Mum's still alive?
Not this time. When we were separated, I thought I'd lost you too.
We won't get separated again. We'll stay together, whatever happens.
Whatever happens.
When Don reunites with his children, Carlisle brings a quiet, tortured vulnerability to the role. You can see the guilt eating away at him, even as he tries to hold his family together. But the tragedy of Don is that his flaws become his undoing.
It was really fast, you know, chased us, chased your mum, and we were trapped.
Was there nothing you could do?
I couldn't do anything. She was already gone.
Unfortunately for him, the past has a nasty habit of catching up, and it does so with devastating consequences. Tammy and Andy, driven by curiosity and a need to find a photo of their mother, sneak out of the Green Zone and make a horrifying discovery at their home. Alice is alive. She's infected but asymptomatic, essentially a carrier of the virus who doesn't turn.
Interesting iris variation. Do one of your parents have the same? My mother.
Catherine McCormack's Alice, though underused, serves as a catalyst for the film's events. Her immunity to the virus makes her both a scientific miracle and a walking apocalypse. And McCormack brings a quiet, haunting sadness to Alice, particularly in her scenes with Don, where her trust in his betrayal collide with tragic inevitability.
I shouldn't have run away. I was scared. Please forgive me. I love you. Yeah. Oh God, I love you too.
This is where 28 weeks later shifts from simmering tension to all-out carnage. Don, overcome with guilt and love, sneaks into Alice's quarantined room. It's a tragic, heartbreaking moment. One kiss is all it takes for the virus to transfer, and Don becomes infected. What follows is a horrifying transformation as he turns into one of the monsters he once fled and annihilates his partner. Carlisle's performance here elevates Don from mere plot device to a tragic embodiment of the film's bleak message. With Don then rampaging through the medical area, the infection spreads like wildfire through the Green Zone, tearing apart what little order the military had established. The calm is obliterated, replaced by panic, screams, and rivers of blood as the infected rampage through the streets of London once again.
Abandon selective targeting. Shoot everything. Targets are now free. We've lost control.
Abandon selective targeting. All targets are now free.
Confirm order?
Target everyone at ground level. No exception.
Idris Elba delivers a brief but memorable turn as General Stone, the cold and unforgiving leader overseeing the Green Zone. Elba's performance exudes authority and menace, perfectly capturing the detached, bureaucratic mindset of someone tasked with containing the uncontainable.
We have issues of disease and sanitation, not to mention we don't fully understand the virus yet.
Major, what are you afraid of?
Stone isn't evil, he's a product of the situation, a man forced to make impossible decisions even if it means sacrificing innocent lives. From here, the film becomes a desperate fight for survival. Tammy and Andy, now hunted by both the infected and the military, find unlikely allies in Scarlett, played by Rose Byrne, a compassionate medical officer, and Jeremy Renner's Doyle, a sniper.
I need to get them out of here immediately.
No exceptions. It's a code red.
I know what it is. These kids are with me. My name is Andy! We have to find him. I'm gonna get him out of here. I'm gonna get you both out of here. Trust me.
Look, take him out! Take him out!
Why aren't you at your post?
Why aren't you? Okay, guys, do what you want, but I'm gonna get the fuck out of here. You coming?
Scarlett recognizes the significance of Andy's potential immunity, and believes his blood could hold the key to a cure. Meanwhile, Doyle, one of the few military personnel with a shred of humanity left, defies orders and protects the children, as the military resorts to a brutal Code Red protocol, total extermination of everyone, infected or not, to contain the outbreak.
Their mother had very special blood,
But they might have.
so their lives are far more valuable than mine or yours.
I got it.
Rose Byrne's Scarlett is the closest thing the film has to a voice of reason, representing science and hope in a story defined by chaos and destruction. Her performance is understated but effective, balancing compassion with determination. Scarlett isn't just a bystander, she's proactive, risking everything to protect the children and potentially find a cure.
Flynn, goddammit, I know you can hear me. The code red, chain of command. I'm stuck out here needing extraction. Better be there, because we will be.
Then there's Jeremy Renner as Doyle, the sniper who becomes the film's most heroic figure. Renner's performance is grounded and charismatic, offering a rare glimpse of decency amidst the chaos. Doyle starts as a soldier following orders, but as the situation spirals out of control, he chooses to defy his superiors and save Tammy and Andy.
Hey, you okay? Makes you tired, huh? Me too. Okay, I need you to help me, okay? Help me with your sister. You got that?
Renner brings warmth and humanity to the role, making Doyle sacrifice one of the film's most gut-wrenching moments. It's a performance that cements Doyle as the moral anchor of the story, a man who chose to do the right thing, even when it cost him everything.
You pop the clutch when I tell you, okay? You get them to the stadium. I'll meet you there.
The film's set pieces are relentless, showcasing the sheer scale of the chaos. The firebombing of London is a haunting spectacle, a city reduced to ash as the military sacrifices everything to stop the virus. But even their most extreme measures fail. The infected are too fast, too relentless, and the virus spreads faster than it can be contained. Fresnadillo's direction here is unflinching. The violence is chaotic, raw, and disturbingly realistic, driving home the futility of human efforts against the rage virus.
Bring in biosoldier units. Fan out from the pre-designated positions. Use of chemical weapons authorized. Repeat, all units, chemical weapons are authorized.
Keep your head down.
Amidst the destruction, the characters shine. Don's arc is a tragedy of guilt and consequence. His cowardice at the start comes full circle when he becomes an instrument of the virus's return and the chief figure hunting his children down. Tammy and Andy then serve as the emotional heart of the story, children burdened with surviving a nightmare world they never asked for. Scarlett is the voice of hope, desperately clinging to the belief that a cure is possible, while Doyle's sacrifice is a gut-wrenching reminder that heroism in this world often ends in blood. The final act is a relentless sprint to the finish line. Tammy, Andy, and Scarlett make a desperate escape from London, chased by the infected and pursued by the military. Unfortunately, Scarlett is killed and Andy is bitten by his infected father, forcing Tammy to kill the only parent they had left.
We'll find Andy.
Luckily, Andy's immunity saves him, and the siblings are airlifted to safety by Doyle's friend Flynn, but the damage is done. The final scene shows the rage virus spreading to Paris, its crimson tide sweeping across Europe. The infection isn't contained, it's only just begun, likely as a result of Andy himself.
Am I one of them?
No. No, you're not. We stay together. Whatever happens.
No! No, Andy!
I'm so sorry. I'm scared. I shouldn't have really.
Where 28 Days Later was about survival, this film is about failure of governments, systems, and individuals. The US military's attempts to rebuild Britain are undone by one simple mistake, and the consequences are catastrophic. The rage virus doesn't just destroy individuals, it obliterates societies, exposing the fragility of human order and the arrogance of thinking we can control nature.
What if it comes back?
It won't come back.
What if it does?
If it comes back, we kill it. It's code red.
At its core, 28 Weeks Later is a brutal, relentless sequel that expands on the original while delivering a gut-wrenching dose of nihilism. It's a film about guilt, survival, and the horrifying reality that sometimes, no matter how hard we try, we're powerless to stop the inevitable. In this universe, the rage virus doesn't forgive, it doesn't forget, and it's never truly gone.
We understand that it did not manage to go airborne and that the last infected human died 6 months ago.
We weren't here 6 months ago.
Major.
What makes the characters here so effective is their humanity. They're flawed, fragile, and painfully relatable. There are no indestructible heroes. Don is consumed by guilt, Scarlett dies trying to do the right thing, Doyle sacrifices himself to save others, while Tammy and Andy are left to navigate a world that's been torn apart by adults who failed them.
When he first described how he was going to do the film, it was this idea of this father figure, who the film begins through his eyes, if you like, and then his children who were abroad at the time of the infection are brought back. But it's got this idea of looking at this thing of enormous value to the world is centered in this family, and it's played out through the family drama, if you like.
Especially because a small thing like a family could affect to the whole nation. This is one of the things that we try to develop in the screenplay.
So it was really to try and think about, what the world would look like, or what would happen to the United Kingdom if there were only 500 people left.
In the hands of a lesser cast, 28 Weeks Later could have been a soulless exercise in gore and spectacle, but the performances elevate the material, grounding the film's relentless destruction with a raw, emotional weight. It isn't just a movie about the end of the world, it's a film about the people caught in its path, and that's what makes it truly unforgettable.
I think this one is more about survival. It's a survival film. Virus survives at the end, and the main characters always try to survive to the worst of the nightmares.
It's something that's so real and so tangible that it's terrifying.
It's all about that survival. It's all about that relentless, intense feeling of how you survive and what would you do if you were in that situation.
At the heart of 28 Weeks Later is its unflinching bleakness. Humanity's attempts to clean up the wreckage and repopulate Britain are doomed before they even begin, and Fresnadillo doesn't pull his punches. Governments fail, systems collapse, and the people caught in the middle don't stand a chance.
To make it real, to make this story real, if I put myself as audience watching the movie, I would love to see a movie that you could smell the characters and the environment, and you could feel that story could happen really close to you.
Nowhere is this failure more evident than in the military's response. The US occupation of London and their so-called Green Zone might look promising on the surface, but it was always built on naivete and hubris. As soon as the virus is reintroduced, the military's measures spiral into unhinged desperation. Code Red, the indiscriminate slaughter of both infected and uninfected civilians, is a chilling depiction of humanity's instinct to destroy when control is lost. Firebombing, snipers shooting at crowds, chemical weapons, the military's safe solution is every bit as terrifying as the virus itself.
It was like a sort of clean new world.
And they use this as a Garden of Eden that they can start again from with a few thousand people and slowly spread out into the country and repopulate the country. So you've got this wonderful visual stuff at the beginning of them. You see them beginning to clean up the mess, that there's this terrible mess that's been left. And then there's optimism that they can start again and get things going again. And of course, because it's this kind of film, it's not quite that easy and things start to go wrong.
There comes a point where infected pretty much take over this protected area that we had. And Code Red means take out everyone, exterminate anybody, infected or not. So here's the thing, the very people I was there to protect, I'm now there to take out.
Another thing that sets 28 Weeks Later apart is its scale. Boyle's 28 Days Later was raw and intimate, focusing on isolated characters navigating a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Fresnadillo, on the other hand, zooms out and delivers a broader, more devastating vision of collapse from the perspective of multiple characters.
28 Weeks Later, there's more action, there's more jumps, there's less suspense. In the first film, you didn't know what was happening. The audience woke up with this guy who was in hospital and they were with him. What the hell is going on in this city? This time, you see exactly what happens from patient zero to the disease spreading. You see it on a much bigger scale.
The cinematography embraces the larger scope, capturing the firebombing of London, the chaotic military responses, the streets awash with blood and devastation in ways that feel operatic yet disturbingly real. From a technical standpoint, it's a beautifully grim spectacle.
It's a big action film done on a pretty small budget, and a way to achieve a lot of that is realistically, and we've used a lot of handheld camera. I think that's partly because we wanted to look realistic. We wanted to feel sort of believable.
That's why I made the movie as a kind of horror documentary. The style of the documentary is delivering and conveying something real. On the other hand, it's so difficult to shoot in that way. You need a lot of cameras, handheld style, and especially in the acting and the art department, and everything should be linked to that idea. It's the best way that you can face this story about an infection taking over London.
The violence here is also brutal, fast, and relentless. The infected tear through crowds like rabid animals, leaving blood and screams in their wake. It's not just about jump scares or gore, it's about the overwhelming sense of hopelessness that sets the film apart. You're not watching heroes overcome impossible odds, you're watching ordinary people get crushed under the weight of forces they can't possibly stop.
The main concept we had in mind is not to repeat the first idea, which was a fantastic idea with Danny Boyle and Alex Garland. I think this one is more about survival. It's a survival film.
The nation is rebuilding, provisional government is trying to repopulate the city, and one special family is trying to start over, trying to forget the important loss of the mother.
I think that was the main problem we had from the beginning, to make a movie about something so big as a repopulation of the country. That's why we wanted to follow this family.
Fresnadillo combines sweeping apocalyptic imagery with chaotic handheld shots to put you right in the middle of the mayhem, which, along with the pacing and John Murphy's score, once again, works together to create a relentless, suffocating experience.
They're being pretty faithful to the guerrilla style that 28 Days was, which made it stand out from your average horror film, So they're keeping that style.
Enrique did a lot of handheld. I mean, he got beat up every day. Blood always on the camera. It's always covered in plastic and right in the thick of things. Even Danny Boyle, who did some second unit stuff, got beat up and hurt his shoulder. Couldn't do it anymore.
What makes it so effective is its refusal to offer any hope or comfort, unlike the ending of 28 Days Later. The final moments of the film, infected hordes swarming through Paris, deliver a final punch to the gut. Tammy and Andy are likely dead, and the virus has spread beyond Britain, and the rest of the world is next. It's an indication that some things can't be stopped, and some mistakes can't be undone.
One of the new things in this sequel is, for the first time, you're tracking one infected character, watching how a man is becoming an infected man, and for an instance, you are there with him, feeling that kind of rage and trying to understand what's going on with these infected people.
One of the first things Juan Carlos said to me, what I thought was quite interesting, he said that I really feel for the infected. I asked him why, and he said because they have lives too, and they have children, they have things that they've lost through all of this, you know. And I thought that's a lovely, sensitive way of looking at this and portraying this and trying to see, even through the madness and the rage in the character's eyes, that there's something else in there, that there's a heartbeat still to the person. And maybe this is the main difference from the previous film, that the infected in this, represented by Don through Don, are actually have logic, and he's still a person deep down inside, and he's still got some kind of desire to track his children. That is bringing them back towards him and keeping that little family unit.
While it lacks the raw intimacy of 28 Days Later, and has a few plot holes like Don's ability to have access to Alice, who should have been more restricted, covered with cameras and surrounded by armoured guards, it more than makes up for it with its sheer scale, intensity and brutality. It's a bigger, bloodier and more ambitious sequel that refuses to let the audience look away from the carnage.
Both the films have been very difficult to make because they've been reasonably low budget, filming in London and trying to do something a bit different. There've been a lot of railways, undergrounds, major sites, gas attacks, helicopters falling apart. It's been really difficult, but luckily the production team have done a fantastic job. Juan Carlos and Enrique wanted to find a Spanish-speaking cameraman, and it came up with Enrique Chediak. He was really energetic, positive, had really great ideas about how to doing the day for night. A lot of the film had to be shot day for night because of shooting at night. All the lights are on in London. We couldn't turn all the lights off because the lights should be off, obviously, in a post-apocalyptic city. And I think he's been really fundamental part of the team. And, you know, the three Latin producer, cameraman and director really have been the heart of making the film.
Fresnadillo shows how the rage virus isn't just a fictional infection, it's a reflection of our own fragility, reminding us that when the world burns, we might just be the ones holding the match.
Infection is taking over your body and you lose your control. And the rage is dominating you. And I love the idea about rage. Rage is a feeling that you can see and you can feel in our world. That's the main idea about the infection. Because infection is rage, and rage is a feeling that you could understand very well.
From its pulse-pounding opening scene, the frantic escape sequence that sets the tone for the entire film, to its bleak, unforgettable finale, 28 weeks later proves itself to be a worthy successor to one of modern horror's greatest achievements.
He brings just a really fresh visual experience to this film.
He's an individual filmmaker, you know, he's not just going to do what the first film did, he's going to bring his individual touch to it, really, and it's got tremendous kind of flair and energy as a film, and it's a highly individual piece of filmmaking, so we were lucky really to persuade him to come and do it.
With that said, I hope everyone is having a safe and fun holiday season, and if I don't see you on my Movie Nights with Niat podcast this weekend, I wish you all a happy new year. Thanks for giving me the best job in the world. I really appreciate it, and know that I wouldn't be here if it weren't for each and every one of you. It's Niat here with Film Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.
Since it began, who have you killed? You wouldn't be alive now if you hadn't killed somebody.
I killed a boy.
But you had to. Otherwise, he'd have killed you.
It's a boy.
Wait. Don't know who's out there.
Don, it's a kid. Don! Help us!
It might be your brother or your sister or your oldest friend. It makes no difference.
Right, because if they slowed you down...
I'd leave them behind.
This is a glorious day. A day of judgment.
My children!
There were so many dead. Infected and non-infected alike. There are many kinds of death. And some are better than others.
It has been over 2 decades since 28 Days Later redefined the zombie genre, not with shambling corpses, but with a raw, adrenalized nightmare powered by rage. Directed by Danny Boyle and written by Alex Garland, the original film didn't just revive the undead, it reimagined them entirely. It introduced the world to a hyper-violent, fast-acting viral outbreak, one that didn't raise the dead, but instead turned the living into something far worse. Creatures stripped of reason, consumed by fury, and driven by the uncontrollable will to destroy and infect.
Dad, you alright?
Hannah, I love you very much. Stay where you are.
Dad?
Keep away from me!
Dad?
Keep away from me! Keep away from me!
Dad!
5 years later, 28 Weeks Later tried to expand the scope. Directed by Juan Carlos Fresnadillo with a new creative team, the sequel moved away from the intimacy of the first film and shifted its lens to a broader military and geopolitical canvas. The virus returned through carelessness and bureaucracy, and London once again fell. While visually arresting and ambitious in scale, 28 Weeks Later lacked the same grounded emotional core, the introspection, and philosophical resonance of its predecessor. And now 28 years later arrives, marking the return of the franchise's original creative architects. Danny Boyle is back behind the camera, Alex Garland returns to the script. What they've crafted is not just a continuation, but a transformation, an exploration of what happens after the end, when the smoke is cleared and the monsters, both human and viral, have had time to evolve. The movie plunges us into a Britain that has fundamentally changed. Society is fractured into isolated communities, civilization has regressed into survivalism, and the virus, once a short-term death sentence, has mutated into something more complex, more enduring, and far more horrifying. The rage virus no longer burns hot and fast. It is adapted. It has branched into new forms, variants shaped by starvation, by patience, by reproduction, and by something disturbingly close to intelligence. At the center of this new world is Spike, a 12-year-old boy raised on the fortified island of Lindisfarne, one of the last remaining safe zones in the UK. When a coming-of-age rite thrusts him into the infected mainland alongside his father Jamie, their journey reveals not just the horrors of the changed world, but the breakdown of trust, family, and moral certainty. As Spike seeks a cure for his dying mother Isla, he encounters not only monstrous infected but moral decay, strange survivors, and the enigmatic Dr. Ian Kelson, whose past and current preoccupations blur the lines between science and sacrilege. Through Spike's eyes, we witness a world not only ravaged by plague, but haunted by memory, betrayal, and the slow erosion of what it means to be human. This is no longer the story of escape, it's a story about what remains, about what survives, about how both humanity and the infection have adapted to a new world, and perhaps more disturbingly, to each other.
Look at what's in front of you.
28 years later is a structural reinvention of the 28 Days Later universe. Rather than repeating the visual style and narrative rhythm of its predecessors, it builds upon the existing foundation, expanding the lore of the rage virus and exploring the long-term social, biological, and psychological consequences of a world shaped by prolonged isolation and survival. It introduces a host of new ideas that transform the understanding of the virus and reframes the future direction of the franchise. Before we jump into our breakdown and review of the movie, I thought it would be pertinent to tackle the evolution of the rage virus in this movie because it is fascinating.
Go back to the trees.
You're on your own.
Originally, the rage virus burned fast and bright. In 28 Days Later, the infected lived only 5 weeks before succumbing to starvation and exhaustion. Their threat was immense but short-lived, a biological wildfire as it were. 28 Weeks Later introduced the concept of asymptomatic carriers, infected humans without outward showing symptoms that were still contagious. This, coupled with a misguided helicopter flight, led to the infection spreading to Paris and other European cities. But 28 years later redefines the virus. No longer a chaotic burst of uncontrolled violence, it is adapted for sustainability. It is now strategic, capable of persistence and variety. This change fundamentally alters the balance of power in the narrative. The film introduces multiple new variants of the infected, each shaped by different survival strategies. Together, they reveal a viral ecosystem that is no longer about collapse, but about continuity. Alphas are not simply another iteration of the infected. They are the next step in the virus's biological development, an apex variant shaped by decades of mutation, environmental pressure, and selective survival. Unlike the standard infected, who lash out in uncontrolled frenzies, burn out quickly and often succumb to starvation or injury, alphas endure. They are faster, stronger, and more intelligent. They don't just react, they plan. They don't swarm blindly, they lead. The virus has learned that chaos alone is not sustainable, and in response it has created order. The original Rage virus acted primarily on the amygdala and hypothalamus, inducing hyperaggression, fearlessness, and extreme adrenal responses. It functioned like a neurological sledgehammer, overriding higher cognition in favor of feral violence. But this approach came at a cost: high transmission, high mortality, and rapid burnout. The infected simply could not sustain themselves. In contrast, alphas represent a strain of rage that appears to work with the host body rather than against it. Physiologically, these individuals exhibit enhanced muscle mass, skeletal density, and endurance. Their pain thresholds are elevated to near inhuman levels. They can take hits that would kill a normal infected and continue charging forward with barely a flinch. Blunt force is ineffective. Decapitation or chemical sedation becomes the only reliable means of neutralization, beyond firing more than 12 arrows to bring them down. This suggests a fundamental shift in how the virus interacts with the endocrine and nervous systems. The alpha strain appears to stimulate sustained production of stress hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol, while also promoting regenerative muscle growth, paralleling real-world conditions like congenital adrenal hyperplasia or extreme anabolic steroid use. These traits aren't merely side effects, they're adaptations, refinements. But physicality alone doesn't explain the alpha's threat. What truly separates them is cognition. Unlike the original infected, who were erratic and indiscriminate, alphas retain higher brain function, specifically elements of prefrontal cortex activity. They demonstrate situational awareness, coordination, problem-solving, and most importantly, leadership. They do not simply attack the nearest target. They track, they wait, they respond to stimuli with predatory patience. In some cases, they appear to direct lesser infected through motion or sound cues, suggesting a form of command hierarchy within infected groups. This is an evolutionary turning point. The Rage virus has shifted from creating mobs to cultivating packs, from random aggression to structured dominance. We move from a viral outbreak to something more akin to an ecological species development, where infected individuals operate not as a singular swarm, but as roles within a tiered system. Alphas are the commanders, the tacticians, the apex predators. They also command the infected to feed, enabling the survival of all those within their pack, including the regular infected, who now no longer die due to starvation, provided they're being led by an alpha. Perhaps more disturbing of all is the emerging ritualistic behavior and patterns of violence that go beyond mere survival. They take trophies like Yachua, they display their kills. Heads are removed not for efficiency, but for theater. To me, this suggests not only memory, but the possibility of identity, however warped or instinctual. Such acts hint at more than just retained intelligence. They suggest that the virus is pushing towards symbolic action, perhaps as a means of asserting dominance, communicating territorial control, or even courting reproduction. These aren't mindless killings, they are messages. This is important because it places the alphas not just in the realm of physical threat, but a cultural one. The virus isn't just replicating cells, it may be replicating behavior, structure, a primitive form of society. Not civilization, certainly, but it's a reflection in the broken mirror of viral evolution. While not explicitly confirmed, there are also heavy implications that the alphas play a reproductive role within the infected population. Their dominance, physicality, and leadership behavior strongly suggest a pack hierarchy in which the alpha male controls viral propagation. This could mean that certain infected females are being impregnated, leading to the emergence of new variants or even a generational shift within the infected. In this model, rage is no longer spreading only by bite or blood, it's breeding. In biological terms, this is extremely significant. Viruses rarely rely on sexual reproduction to spread, but rage may be pushing toward a parasitic control model, one where it co-opts the host's reproductive system to generate new carriers with stable mutations. In essence, rage is transforming from a fast kill virus to a persistent parasitic organism, one that builds generations. Though horrifying, none of this is biologically implausible. Nature is rife with examples of parasites and viruses that manipulate host behavior for their own gain. Toxoplasma gondii alters rodent fear response, making them more likely to be eaten by cats, the parasite's definitive host, aiding the parasite's transmission cycle. A Phycocordyceps fungus drives ants to higher locations before killing them, ensuring optimal spore dispersal, while rabies triggers violent biting behavior just before it kills the host, maximizing the chance of transmission. What the alpha strain of rage does is conceptually similar, but refined. Instead of just hijacking the brain for aggression, it preserves motor control, enhances cognitive function, and promotes a sustainable infection strategy. It uses the host as a soldier, not a time bomb. The alphas represent a shift in the very nature of the rage virus. No longer simply a pandemic, it is becoming a form of biological speciation. The virus has adapted to its environment, selecting for hosts that can survive longer, spread further, and exert control. The result is not a disease, it is a predator. Where 28 days later gave us viral chaos, 28 years later gives us viral order, and in doing so, it reframes the infected not as a collapsing system, but a rising one. A species born from our own, with strength, intelligence, and purpose. The alpha strain is not just the next step in the virus's evolution, it may be the first step into something far worse. A virus that thinks is dangerous, a virus that leads is apocalyptic, and if the rage virus has already learned how to lead, then what happens when it learns how to build? Up until this point, the rage virus had always been defined by speed, ferocity, and short-term devastation. But as the virus evolved into new strains, so too did its survival strategies. One of the most notable and unsettling outcomes of this evolution is the emergence of a new subspecies of the infected, the Slow-Lows, or what I dub the bloaters. Unlike their frenzied predecessors, bloaters are passive, sluggish, and grotesquely altered. They represent a viral detour, one that favors low energy expenditure, long-term survival, and environmental adaptation over the short-lived violence of the original outbreak. And in doing so, they embody one of the most plausible evolutionary responses a pathogen can have when faced with scarcity and prolonged isolation: conservation. Physiologically, they're markedly different from standard infected. They are obese, pale, and mostly immobile, dragging themselves across the ground in search of carrion, insects, and other detritus. Their behavior is lethargic and opportunistic, relying on scavenging rather than hunting. They are largely passive until provoked. When threatened or stimulated, they lash out with sudden, violent bursts of aggression, revealing that while their energy use is limited, the rage virus still simmers beneath the surface. What makes them particularly disturbing is their paradoxical nature. They are pitiful in appearance, almost inert, but retain the capacity for lethal violence. More than any other infected variant, they blur the line between creature and corpse, functioning less like predators and more like ecological parasites embedded within the ruined landscape of post-Rage Britain. To understand how the Rage virus produced such a variant, one must consider how pathogens adapt over time. In its original form, the Rage virus spread explosively, causing acute aggression, elevated adrenaline levels, and the complete suppression of high brain functions. The host became a machine of violence, but at a cost. The infection was unsustainable. The infected perished from starvation, dehydration, or collapse. The virus, in that state, burned too hot to endure. The bloaters are evidence that the virus is mutated toward conservation. In real-world virology, RNA viruses evolve rapidly due to high mutation rates and the absence of genetic proofreading. Under environmental pressures such as dwindling host populations and food scarcity, the virus would begin selecting for traits that promote long-term persistence. Thus, where Rage once sought explosive transmission, it now favors diversity, creating a subset of infected that resort to dormancy, scavenging, and metabolic efficiency. A comparable phenomenon can be found in Mycobacterium tuberculosis, which can lie dormant in human hosts for years, emerging only when conditions become favorable. Similarly, the HIV virus has evolved from causing rapid deterioration to creating chronic infections that persist for decades. These examples mirror what the Rage virus has done with bloaters, adapted for the long game. Biologically, their emergence suggests a shift in how the virus interacts with host metabolisms. In the early stages of infection, Rage activated the sympathetic nervous system to an extreme degree, flooding the host with adrenaline, heightening aggression, and driving physical output far beyond sustainable levels. But in the bloaters, this function appears to be suppressed or altered. Instead of ramping up metabolism to the point of burnout, the virus now slows the host's energy expenditure. Muscle activity is reduced, aggression is dormant unless provoked, and feeding becomes a slow, scavenging affair. These individuals conserve energy much like hibernating animals, relying on environmental foraging rather than pursuit. It's no longer about spreading the virus through mass infection, it's about embedding the virus into the ecosystem for as long as possible. The physical obesity of the bloaters may also be a viral adaptation, possibly encouraging the hoarding of fat reserves for long-term survival. In this sense, the rage virus has shifted from a neural parasite to a systemic one, modifying both brain and body to suit the environment. In the new strain, the rage virus effectively sacrifices virulence and velocity for persistence and stealth. It no longer seeks to dominate through violence, but through quiet occupation of the biological landscape. The environmental context of 28 years later is critical to understanding this adaptation. Britain is isolated. The majority of its population is either dead or infected. Food sources are limited. With a reduced number of new hosts to infect, the virus has little choice but to adapt or die. The bloaters are a manifestation of this forced mutation, a byproduct of evolutionary pressure on a virus that can no longer sustain its original behavior. Over time, viral drift would allow these mutations to propagate through surviving hosts. Strains that favored low energy use and reduced aggression would simply last longer, and in a world of diminishing returns, longevity becomes survival. Within the new hierarchy of the infected, the bloaters occupy a unique space. They're not leaders like the alphas. They're not the chaotic masses of the original outbreak. Instead, they are remnants, biological echoes of a virus that has found a new niche. They populate the ruins, they linger, and in doing so, they ensure that rage never truly disappears. Their presence also implies potential stages of infection or transformation. The emergence of child-sized bloaters suggests that either the infected are reproducing, which is super gross, or that this variant progresses over time into larger, more grotesque forms. Either scenario presents alarming possibilities. The bloaters effectively embody the viral principle of adaptation through necessity. What began as a force of apocalyptic fury has, over time, learned to endure. The rage virus has slowed itself, lowered its metabolic footprint, and embedded its carriers into the environment as long-term scavengers. It is no longer trying to burn through civilization, it is trying to outlast it. The bloaters reveal that the rage virus has moved past destruction, it has become ecology, and in that quiet, crawling hunger, we find something far more unsettling than chaos: persistence. In stark contrast are the starved, emaciated remnants of the original infected. They are unable to feed and incapable of adapting. They represent failure, infected who could not keep up with the changing world. In any process of natural selection, not all mutations lead to advantage. Some organisms adapt, thrive, and dominate, while others falter, unable to match the changing environment, destined to vanish as relics of a failed evolutionary path. In the world of 28 years later, this concept manifests in one of the virus's most haunting variants, the starved, essentially regular infected without an alpha leader helping them survive. They are not apex predators, they are not cunning pack leaders, nor slow-burning survivors. They are the leftovers of a viral past, biological dead ends that are physically present but functionally inert. Starved, skeletal, and deteriorating, they embody the fading remnants of the original infection, still infected but reduced to near non-existence. The starved are visually distinct from all other infected types, emaciated to the point of resembling walking corpses. Their musculature is atrophied, their movement is slow and feeble, and their aggression has been dampened to the point of irrelevance. Unlike the explosive ferocity of what they were in their earlier stages, or the hulking dominance of the alphas, the starved appear almost passive, still animate, still carriers of the virus, but no longer capable of effective predation. From a physiological perspective, this condition likely stems from prolonged nutrient deprivation combined with the virus's inability to recalibrate metabolic function. The original rage virus triggered extreme hormonal and neurological responses, pushing the host into a state of constant fight or flight. But this came at a cost, an unsustainable metabolic rate that rapidly burned through energy reserves. Without food or hydration, these infected collapsed in a matter of weeks. The starved represent what happens when this cycle continues unchecked. Their bodies have cannibalized themselves to stay alive. Their tissues have broken down, their cognitive faculties have withered, and yet the virus clings to the remnants of a host that can no longer serve its purpose. In essence, they are infected on life support. If the alphas and bloaters demonstrate the virus's adaptive potential, then the starved are the control group, the strain that failed to keep up. Evolution, particularly in rapidly mutating RNA-based viruses, is not a linear progression, but a branching tree. Some branches lead to viable long-term strategies, reduced virulence, improved transmission, or ecological balance. Others die off, unable to compete with more efficient mutations. The starved obviously fall squarely into the latter category. They neither kill effectively nor live sustainably. They cannot transmit the virus efficiently, cannot lead, cannot outlast. They are vestiges of a strain that no longer dominates, preserved in the decaying flesh of those it consumed. They are not the future of the rage virus, they are its ghosts, biological reverberations of an outbreak that once tore through civilization, now reduced to limping silhouettes of rage. In a world where the virus is branching, adapting, and in some forms thriving, the starved represent what happens when evolution fails to respond in time. The rage virus was never designed to last. It was a pathogen of extinction, fast, uncontrollable, and ultimately unsustainable. But it becomes clear that this virus is no longer bound to its original function. It is mutating, adapting not just for survival, but potentially for legacy. And nowhere is this shift more disturbing than in the emergence of the pregnant infected and the subsequent birth of the newborn. To comprehend how an infected host, one supposedly consumed by viral psychosis and catastrophic systemic inflammation, could carry a pregnancy to term, we must first look at the biological mechanics of gestation and viral interaction. Pregnancy, by design, is an immunologically delicate state. The maternal body suppresses its immune response to avoid rejecting the fetus. This immune suppression creates a window, one that some viruses exploit. Pathogens such as Zika, CMV, and rubella have all demonstrated the ability to cross the placental barrier, often with tragic consequences. But some, like hepatitis B or herpes simplex, can persist in the mother without directly harming the child. The infected pregnant woman we see in 28 years later appears to represent a rare fusion of these biological principles and the evolved rage virus. Her infection is undeniable. Eyes bloodshot, posture decaying, yet she's almost lucid and functional when it comes to matters of giving birth. This suggests that the virus is either mutated to coexist with the altered immune environment of pregnancy, or is capable of entering a suppressed state to preserve the host long enough for gestation to complete. It's a viral survival strategy not based on violence, but on patience. It implies either a latency-like mechanism or a fundamental reprogramming of the virus to prioritize longevity over immediate aggression. This host-level tolerance isn't just a horror, it's an evolutionary leap. The key to understanding the newborn's uninfected status lies in the biology of the placenta. This complex organ operates as both a lifeline and a barrier, regulating what passes between mother and fetus. In many viral cases, it successfully presents vertical transmission, meaning a virus present in the mother does not necessarily reach the child. In the movie, Dr. Ian Kelson hypothesizes that a similar mechanism is at work with the rage virus. The placenta acts as a biological firewall, halting viral transfer and insulating the fetus from the infection raging within the mother. If true, this changes the understanding of rage entirely. It is no longer an absolute, uniformly fatal condition. It is a pathogen that can be modulated, one that, under the right conditions, may allow its host to live, reproduce, and give rise to new life, untouched by its aggression. The uninfected child, born from an infected mother and apparently untouched by the virus, raises an even more critical question. Is she simply uninfected, or something more? There are two possibilities. One, passive immunity. If the child was exposed to viral antigens without receiving the live virus, it's possible she developed passive immunity through maternal antibody transfer. This is a well-documented phenomenon in immunology. In this case, the fetus may have built a resistance to the rage virus in utero, potentially becoming the first truly immune human being in the post-rage world. If scalable, this could offer the foundation for future biological resistance or even vaccine development. The other possibility, of course, is 2, viral latency. Alternatively, and more ominously, the child may carry the virus in a dormant state. Viral latency is the ability of a virus to hide within host cells without expressing itself. The child may be a sleeper host, presenting no symptoms now, but capable of future viral activation under the right environmental or physiological stresses. If this is the case, she's not immune, she's a ticking biological time bomb. Either way, the newborn is a seismic disruption to the previously understood life cycle of rage. It is no longer a virus that simply ends lives. It may be one that now creates them, or at the very least, allows them to exist under certain conditions. This is a radical shift in the viral paradigm. It suggests that rage may be transitioning from outbreak vector to ecological fixture, from short-term catastrophe to a long-term element of human evolution. The virus is no longer burning through its hosts, it's learning to live within them. The pregnant, infected, and the newborn are not simply shocking plot devices, they are signs of a viral renaissance. The rage virus, like all successful pathogens, is adapting to its environment, to its hosts, and to time itself. It is no longer content to burn bright and die. It is learning to smolder, to endure, and perhaps even to inherit the world it once tried to destroy. If the newborn is immune, she may represent humanity's last hope. If she's latent, she may be its future threat. But either way, her existence proves a terrifying truth. The rage virus is not done. It is not just mutating, it is integrating. It is not just killing, it is selecting. It is not just a virus anymore. It may be the next phase of humanity.
Once you walk onto that mainland, there's no rescue.
Where 28 days later gave us the adrenaline-fueled chaos of societal collapse and 28 weeks later painted a grim portrait of a militarized recovery gone wrong, 28 years later instead chooses to dwell in the aftermath, not just the ruins of civilization, but the wreckage of what it means to persist when hope has long since dried up. The film opens during the earliest days of the rage virus outbreak, not in the decaying cities or suburban sprawl we've seen before, but in the serene Scottish Highlands. A young boy named Jimmy is watching Teletubbies with his sisters and cousins, unaware of the nightmare about to descend. Their innocence is shattered in seconds when Jimmy's auntie bursts into the room terrified, urging the children to stay quiet. But it's already too late. The infected breach the door, chaos erupts, and the home is torn apart. Jimmy barely escapes, but his family doesn't. His frantic flight leads him to a local church where he finds his father, a priest, calmly praying, having already accepted the outbreak as divine judgment. Smiling through what he believes is revelation, he gifts Jimmy his crucifix necklace, tells him to keep his faith, and waits quietly as the infected descend upon him. A title car then delivers the aftermath. The rage virus did not merely decimate communities or disrupt systems, it annihilated the entire United Kingdom. Unlike mainland Europe, which managed to contain the spread somehow, Britain was abandoned entirely, quarantined, cut off from aid, infrastructure, and global sympathy. What survivors remain had to endure in complete isolation, left behind by a world that already moved on. When the film jumps ahead to the titular 28 years later, we find ourselves on the island of Lindisfarne, also known as the Holy Island, one of the few remaining outposts of order. The community here is small but disciplined, bound together by necessity and ritual. A fortified causeway connects it to the mainland, but that link is guarded fiercely. Civilization, such as it is, has collapsed into something pre-industrial. Technology is absent. Farming, hunting, and communal rites have taken its place. There are no screens, no engines, no ambitions, only survival.
Don't look at what's in front of you.
It's in this austere, weather-beaten society that we meet Jamie, a hardened man whose worldview is calcified into survivalist pragmatism, and his son Spike, a child on the precipice of adulthood. To survive here means to conform, and Spike's rite of passage is as brutal as the world that shaped it. He must hunt and kill an infected on the mainland. As a central protagonist of 28 years later, Spike represents a generation born into catastrophe, having never known a world untouched by the rage virus. Quiet, observant, and innately empathetic, Spike is a child shaped by absence, of normalcy, of history, and of emotional stability. He's curious but cautious, sensitive yet resilient, and his worldview is shaped as much by folklore and secondhand stories as it is by lived experience. Spike's youth is not defined by innocence, but by an inherited burden to make sense of a broken world and somehow try and survive. His character holds the moral weight of the film, serving as a mirror for the older generation's choices while suggesting a new kind of ethical compass, one uncorrupted by nostalgia or tribalism. While not physically commanding, his strength lies in his quiet resistance to cynicism. He may not fully understand the world he's navigating, but he faces it with a kind of gentle resolve and optimism that makes him the emotional heart of the film. His father Jamie, on the other hand, is a deeply traditional figure, hardened by decades of survival and defined by a stern pragmatism. Charismatic but controlling, Jamie sees strength as the only reliable currency in this brutal world. His leadership is rooted in action and ritual rather than reflection or sentimentality, and he carries himself with the confidence of someone who believes he knows what's best, particularly for those under his protection. He can be charming and jovial, especially in communal settings, but there's a brittleness to his worldview that betrays underlying fear and emotional rigidity. While he remains a commanding presence, his inability to adapt or self-reflect makes him a figure of both strength and stagnation. His interactions with others reveal a man clinging to systems that no longer serve the world they're in, and his stubbornness is both his defining trait and his tragic flaw. What Boyle and Garland craft in these early moments is not just a setting, but a haunting commentary on human regression. Lindisfarne is not a utopia, but a society stalled in place. The people have endured, yes, but they've also surrendered. They've shed technology, discarded progress, and retreated into a shell of feudal hierarchy. Life is now defined by endurance, not innovation, by the rote recitation of rituals rather than curiosity or advancement. They have survived, but at the cost of evolution, and yet the virus they fear has not made the same concession. While humanity has stagnated, the rage virus has adapted, and the binaries of predator and prey, infected and uninfected, are no longer clean. This tension between a humanity frozen in fear and a virus that refuses to stop changing forms the spine of 28 years later. It is a film less interested in the immediate terror of infection and more fascinated by the long-term implications of endurance. What does it mean to live for decades in the shadow of extinction? What becomes of a child raised on legends of survival, only to discover that survival is just another form of stasis?
Don't look at what's in front of you.
We learn that Isla, Spike's mother, lies confined to her bed, gripped by a debilitating illness that quietly anchors the film's emotional stakes. Her condition is more than just physical. It's emblematic of the fragility of life in a world long abandoned by progress. Isla is the film's quietly affecting character, a figure of vulnerability, warmth, and the subtle erosion of identity. Her presence carries a lingering sorrow, but also a deep well of love that shapes the emotional tone of the story. She's often physically subdued, but her impact is psychological and symbolic, representing the cost of trying to remember in a world that encourages forgetting. Her mind, increasingly unreliable, becomes a site of tension between the past and present, and she challenges herself and others to reckon with memory, not as nostalgia, but as something painful, fragile, and worth preserving. Despite the danger that looms beyond the island's fortified causeway, Jamie and his son Spike prepare for the ceremonial hunt that marks the boys' passage into manhood. Watched by their fellow villagers, the act is steeped in ritual and tradition. It's not just a practical task, it's a societal rite, a performance of belonging in a culture that clings to structure where the world has otherwise collapsed. Crossing into the mainland, the father and son duo move cautiously through a landscape that is both eerily silent and alive with threat. Their first encounter is with a variant of infected I call the bloaters, grotesquely obese, sluggish figures that crawl and groan through the underbrush. Though their pace is lethargic, their menace remains, and Jamie and Spike dispatch him with bows and arrows, solidifying Spike's first successful kill. But it should be noted that the boy hesitates to take out a young bloater, seeing a child where his father sees only a threat. Their path then takes him through a woodland that has reclaimed the land. Life, and specifically a nearby herd of deer it seems, has not only endured the collapse of humanity, it has flourished in its absence. The natural world, untamed and unshackled, thrives in a way the survivors never could. But in the crumbling husk of a house, they stumble upon an infected strung upside down, still alive and thrashing. Curiously, carved into its chest is the name Jimmy, a disturbing echo of the boy from the film's prologue. Spike freezes once again, but Jamie tells him that the infected have no soul, no mind, nothing left to save. It's not until the creature breaks free that Spike reacts with a shot to the head. As the infected drops, so too does another piece of Spike's innocence. It's an irreversible moment where survival and morality begin to blur. Their journey continues into a wind-scoured wasteland and graveyard of the old world. It's here that they come across a new sign, the severed head and spine of a stag suspended in a grotesque warning. Someone is hunting, but with purpose, not frenzy, and Jamie immediately realizes they need to move on as an alpha is nearby. Out of the field ahead then emerges a pack of infected, but unlike the aimless rabid hordes of the past, these move in concert, tracking like wolves. At their center is the alpha, a towering, hyper-aggressive figure with a measure of intelligence that orders his pack to chase him down. What follows is chaos as the father and son run away. Jamie's kills here are efficient, while Spike's aim falters in his panicked state. Forced into retreat, they take refuge in an abandoned house and hide in the loft as the infected give up on their chase. That night, as Spike lies awake, he sees a fire burning far off in the distance, hinting at a human presence, but Jamie's response is immediate and cold. They're not to go near it, no questions, no exceptions. For Spike, it plants a seed of doubt that his father is keeping something from him. The boy also has a vivid dream that night of his mother drowning, her head barely above the waves, a subconscious omen of what's coming.
Once you walk onto that mainland, there's no rescues, no exceptions.
Before dawn, the shelter collapses under the force of a sudden deer stampede, forcing them to leave in a hurry. Disoriented but happy to be alive, Jamie and Spike are forced to wade through rising tide waters for their journey home, but trailing behind them is the Alpha. As they near the Holy Island, salvation comes not from chance but from preparation. Jamie signals the Watchmen. Arrows are loosed from the wall, and a makeshift ballista launches a flaming projectile into the Alpha, finally bringing it down. After confirming they're free of infection, the island accepts them back to a hero's welcome, and while Spike has survived his rite of passage, his spirit is slightly shaken. The village, however, sees only the symbolic victory. A feast is held in his honor, complete with applause, food, alcohol, and the weight of communal expectation. Jamie, both proud and performative, hails his son's courage and marksmanship, playing up the success for those watching. But Spike, haunted by his own hesitation and fear during the hunt, sees only failure. That sense of unease reaches a breaking point when Spike notices Jamie slipping away from the celebration with another woman, and the impact is seismic. The father Spike relied on, who taught him to survive and seemed to embody honor and strength, is suddenly revealed as fallible. The emotional betrayal is a crack in the foundation that has silently been forming. Overwhelmed, Spike slips away from the celebration and finds solace in the company of Sam, one of the village elders looking after his mother. Their conversation reveals a fracture that becomes a fault line. Spike confesses his fear, his longing to be with his mother, and the fire he saw burning on the mainland, something Jamie had refused to elaborate on. Sam in turn shares what he knows of Dr. Ian Kelson, the man responsible for the fire, who was once his GP before the collapse, now reduced to myth and suspicion. Known to have survived the apocalypse, but associated with rumors of moral compromise and disturbing behavior, Kelson's name evokes more fear than hope. The conversation leaves Spike with more questions, and an unsettling sense that something has been withheld.
There were so many dead. Infected and non-infected alike.
The following morning, Spike confronts his father, now desperate for clarity. He presses Jamie not just about Kelson, but about Isla, and whether he ever truly intended to save her. Jamie's response is hesitant and evasive until the truth begins to spill. Years earlier, Jamie and a group of survivors had found Kelson, alive but surrounded by a horrifying scene. Hundreds of corpses, meticulously arranged in ways that suggested something ritualistic, even sadistic. But instead of reassurance, Jamie's words only deepen Spike's disillusionment. The confrontation escalates when he mentions the woman Jamie was with last night, causing his father to strike him. It's an act born of shame and helplessness, but it crosses a line that cannot be uncrossed. Spike doesn't respond with tears or outrage. Instead, he calmly draws a knife and tells his father to stay away from them. This moment finalizes the emotional transformation Spike began on the mainland. His rite of passage wasn't just about killing an infected or proving bravery. It was about growing up in the face of disappointment, betrayal, and truth. Jamie's betrayal, Isla's decline, and the world's refusal to offer hope have redefined what adulthood means to him. It's not glory or triumph, it's about the burden of responsibility. And so that morning, Spike sets fire to the village's supply room as a distraction and flees with Isla, leaving behind the only home he's ever known. All that remains is his ailing mother, his bow, and the faint, whispered promise that somewhere, out in the ashes of the mainland, Dr. Kelson might still exist and might still be able to help. Unfortunately for the 12-year-old, Isla is fading. She confuses Spike for Jamie, mutters incoherently, and drifts in and out of awareness. Whatever chance of saving her remains, time is rapidly running out. Elsewhere, a small NATO force dispatched to survey the mainland crashes into the rocks and is immediately ambushed. The infected fall upon them like a wave, and within minutes, the team is decimated. A few manage to retreat into a tunnel system, clinging to the hope of regrouping, but within the dark, something worse than the frenzied infected awaits them. It's here that an alpha starts pulling their heads and spine clean from their bodies, forcing the remaining soldier named Eric to flee. Back with Spike and Isla, the mainland continues to prove hostile. A roaming pack of infected forces them into an abandoned gas station, the air thick with fuel vapor. As the infected close in, Eric arrives just in time, lighting the fumes and igniting a massive explosion that incinerates the attackers. Plot armor, it seems, conveniently keeps Spike and Isla alive.
Can you make her shut up? She can't help it. She can't help it? You can't help me? Why the f did I help you, huh?
Eric serves as a stubborn outsider, a soldier increasingly disillusioned by the collapse of order. Dry-witted, blunt and perceptive, Eric is someone who's learned to operate within the rules, and now finds himself in a world where none of them apply. His skepticism borders on cynicism, but he's not without compassion. His humor and practicality are his armor against despair. As a foreign presence in a deeply insular environment, Eric provides a contrast, highlighting the absurdities, contradictions, and ideological decay of what Britain has become. His role bridges the narrative between isolated survival and the implications of global abandonment. He also explains what he knows. While the Rage virus is contained to the UK, the rest of the world has moved on. Britain has become a myth, its infected a warning, its people abandoned.
What do you think the patrol boats are for?
I know there's a quarantine, but I thought it was only for us.
Quarantine is for any poor fucker who puts one toe on this island.
Their journey eventually leads them to the remnants of a derailed train, where a strange cry echoes through the metal husk. It's not a scream of hunger or rage, but of agony. The source is an infected woman, visibly pregnant and in pain. Isla, moved by instinctive compassion, approaches her cautiously, and for a fleeting moment, there's no violence. And in that fragile pause, the film suggests something unsettling. Perhaps even the infected are capable of restraint under certain biological pressures. Of course, after the child is born, the infected woman's restraint shatters. She lashes out in a frenzy, and Eric is forced to shoot her. The violence is brutal and immediate, but what's left behind is far more confounding. The newborn shows no sign of infection. Dr. Ian Kelson would later hypothesize that the placenta may have functioned as a natural biological barrier, protecting the child in utero. But for Eric, trained to eliminate risk before reason, uncertainty is synonymous with danger, and he prepares to kill the infant. Before he can act, the Alpha returns, revealed to be the same relentless pursuer from the tunnels. It immediately kills Eric, tearing through him like he's performing a Mortal Kombat fatality. And while it might be tempting to see this as an act of senseless aggression, the context reframes it. This isn't just rage, it's protective fury, as the Alpha appears to be responding to the threat posed to his offspring. As it chases Isla and Spike, preparing to strike again, its body seizes, pierced by a tranquilizer. A man that steps from the shadows, calm, composed, utterly in control. This is Dr. Ian Kelson, played by Ray Fiennes, who greets them with a dispassionate clarity, explaining that the Alpha, whom he calls Samson, is not just an enemy to be feared, but a subject to be studied. Kelson has essentially developed a chemical sedative capable of pacifying the infected for short periods, and is a philosophical anomaly in a world dominated by instinct and brute force. Cerebral, cryptic, and oddly serene, he exudes the presence of someone who's been thinking far too long in isolation, and has made peace with unsettling conclusions. His language is careful, precise, often poetic, and his worldview is shaped by both scientific rigor and an almost spiritual reverence for memory and death. Kelson speaks not just to survival, but to the meaning of death, the necessity of mourning, and the ethics of legacy in a post-human world. He's calm without being cold, eccentric without descending into parody, and his detachment is never cruel, just profoundly resigned. As a character, he operates on the film's thematic periphery, drawing attention to the deeper existential questions that others either avoid or can't articulate.
Every skull, a set of thoughts, and these jaws spoke and swallowed. This is a monument to them.
Kelson leads them to a sanctuary, a structure as eerie as it is unforgettable, the Bone Temple. It is not metaphorical. Constructed entirely from the preserved bleached skulls of the dead, the Bone Temple is Kelson's monument to mortality, a visual and philosophical reminder of what remains when everything else has rotted away. Dr. Kelson refers to it as his memento mori, a Latin phrase meaning remember death, remember we must die. For him, these grim installations are reminders that death is inescapable, and that acknowledging it should provoke reflection on how we live. what we value, and what legacy we leave behind. And with Eric having been killed by Samson, Kelson burns the body, scrapes away the flesh, and tells Spike to add the skull to the temple. He then confirms that the newborn is in fact uninfected, a rare biological anomaly that is perhaps even immune. In a landscape ruled by infection, that baby represents a shift, an exception, a threat to the idea that infection means doom. But just as hope begins to flicker, it's extinguished. Kelson diagnoses Isla with terminal cancer, and the disease is advanced beyond saving. For Spike, the news is devastating, yet Isla, weary and accepting, seems almost relieved. Her concern isn't her death, it's her son's burden, and she wants him to be free of it. Dr. Kelson also tells him memento moris, a Latin phrase meaning, remember you must love. He then sedates Spike to spare him the pain of watching and enables Isla to die peacefully. When Spike awakens, he's given her skull and carries it to the temple before placing it at the top, entombing her memory in the only structure this world seems to respect. This act for Spike is not a celebration, but a solemn recognition of loss. It reaffirms the film's central themes, that survival must also be accompanied by meaning, and that remembrance is what separates humanity from the virus it endures.
Do you know the words memento mori?
It means remember death. There are many kinds of death.
Some are better than others.
While Samson returns for the baby and overpowers Kelson, Spike manages to subdue him with one of the Doctor's own tranquilizer darts. Kelson then remains behind, surrounded by his monument to the dead, while Spike sets off with the infant in his arms. He returns to Lindisfarne and leaves the child, whom he names Isla, in the care of the village, along with a note explaining who she is and what she represents. Jamie finds the note and immediately tries to reach his son, but the tide has already come in and Spike is gone, which only begs the question, why didn't Jamie try to look for him before when he knew his son and sick wife were clearly heading to Dr. Kelson? And then 28 days pass. In a final epilogue, we return to Spike getting chased by the infected, right into the arms of Jimmy, the boy who fled the slaughter in the opening prologue. Throughout the film, Jimmy's name appeared carved into infected and scrolled on the walls like scripture. Now a man, played by Jack O'Connell, he leads a bizarre group of survivors known only as the Jimmies. Draped in gold chains and tracksuits, they move like parkour zealots, leaping through ruins and carving through infected with absurd efficiency. It's strange and honestly quite tonally jarring.
I think there's a few too many coming now. Even for a fine young warrior like yourself. Would you mind if we stepped in? 2, 3, 4.
Jimmy is an enigmatic presence, a figure shaped by childhood trauma and twisted ideology that represents what happens when pain is never processed. There's something eerily composed about him, a kind of performative gentleness that masks a volatile and fanatical mind. It's no idle thing that his cross is now inverted, hinting at his perverted evolution of theology. I guess Jimmy stands in for how survivors can turn catastrophe into religion and memory into dogma. While his ideology and character are only partially hinted at, his symbolism is undeniable. He is the future many fear, the smiling face of generational trauma repackaged as salvation. His presence at the end hints at a danger that may yet define what comes next in the series. Coming in January 2026 is 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, directed by Nia DaCosta. Danny Boyle will then return for the trilogy's conclusion, which promises to tackle the battle over the nature of evil, and bring back none other than Cillian Murphy's Jim, who might also be part of the Jimmies, I guess? Whatever happens next, it's clear that 28 Years Later has mutated the franchise. The Rage virus has evolved, so has the story, and now we're just beginning to see what horrors that evolution brings.
My children!
This movie is going to be polarizing for some. On the one hand, it's a character-driven coming-of-age story and exploration of processing grief and death wrapped in horror aesthetics. On the other, it's an ambitious and deeply flawed setup for a new trilogy. There's a frustrating, almost episodic structure to the film, one that trades resolution for cryptic breadcrumbs and introduces ideas it has no intention of finishing. And yet, when it works, it does so quite effectively. Visually, the film is as stunning as it is abrasive. Anthony Dodd Mantle's cinematography uses modified iPhone rigs and frenetic editing to create a raw, immersive experience. The imagery is soaked in overexposed daylight and unnatural hues, creating a hyper-real aesthetic that oscillates between digital clarity and dreamlike distortion. It's a beautiful, ugly movie, deliberately chaotic and often arresting. Boyle's signature directorial flourishes, rapid montages, archival war footage, surreal juxtapositions are all here, but the effect isn't always cohesive. Instead, it feels like we're watching a hallucination of Britain's collapse refracted through the eyes of a child who's never known a stable world. Thematically, Garland's script flirts with everything, from the ethics of euthanasia and the mutation of both biology and ideology in isolation. Some of these threads are haunting, particularly Isla's euthanasia and the quiet reverence of Dr. Kelson's bone monuments. Ray Fiennes brings a gravitas to the role, managing to embody both Colonel Kurtz and a sorrowful priest, and his scenes are among the most affecting. The problem is that the film touches these ideas without grounding them. It gestures towards significance, but often refuses to unpack it any further. Of course, the evolution of the infected is the most fascinating addition for me. The rage virus, once a sprinting death sentence, is mutated, splintering into variants. There's even the pregnant infected woman giving birth mid-rage, resulting in a healthy, uninfected child. An image that's grotesque, surreal, and emblematic of the film's willingness to push into body horror while flirting with themes of rebirth and hope. But again, these concepts are introduced and then abandoned. The baby becomes a symbol, named Isla and then sent back to the village in a Moses-like moment, but the implications are left dangling. The performances are solid though, carrying most of the film. Alfie Williams delivers a breakout turn, anchoring the film with sincerity and pain. Jodie Comer manages to inject soul into a fragmented role, while Aaron Taylor-Johnson is underused as a flawed father doing his best to set up as a pivotal character, only to then disappear after the first act. Edvin Riding offers levity as Eric and nothing else really, but the real star is Fiennes, whose portrayal of Dr. Kelson elevates every scene he's in, even as the script leaves his arc unfinished. Which brings us to the film's ending. I was pretty content and I guess satisfied with most of what we got up until this point, but it's here at the end that it stumbles spectacularly. After setting up profound emotional closure, it swerves into absurdity with the introduction of Jimmy, a bleached blonde cult leader dressed like a tracksuit wearing messiah, backed by a crew of followers who feel more like rejected extras from Mad Max than anything grounded in the prior films. The symbolism is heavy. Yes, Jimmy is a traumatized survivor of the prologue, twisted by his father's apocalyptic teachings, but his arrival derails the tone. The cliffhanger is ludicrous, crass, and for some, offensive, particularly with the imagery that evokes Jimmy Savile and scandals in ways that feel exploitative rather than insightful. The movie ends not with catharsis, but with setup, foreshadowing 28 years later the Bone Temple and beyond. The infected have evolved, the world has become more savage, and Spike, now carrying his mother's memory, walks back into the fire. Ultimately, 28 years later is a film at war with itself. It reclaims the primal horror of 28 Days Later and dares to ask deeper questions about evolution, stagnation, mourning, and the psychology of collapse. But it also indulges in self-sabotage, undermining its power with baffling choices, uneven pacing, and an eye toward franchise longevity rather than storytelling integrity. There's a genuine beating heart here, one wrapped in bone temples and blood, but it's buried beneath layers of tonal whiplash and half-explored ideas. In the end, 28 Years Later is not a failure, it's an unfinished thought. A compelling, often breathtaking attempt to drag a horror saga into the age of myth and memory that is entertaining enough, but doesn't always land.
There's a visceral element to cinema where you have a responsibility to push the envelope as far as you can go.
Now, son! Spike, finish it!
I want that sense of suffocating intensity. It doesn't feel like a sequel, it feels like an original film.